Welcome to the long-awaited Spool Assembly video.
There's a ton of stuff you've got to print, so here's your mechanical parts first. From left to right are your 1032 nuts, your nylon nuts at 5/16, and your gearbox, which will need M3 washers and M3x12 flathead screws. Then you'll need 3 of the 1032 shafts at 4.25 inches each, 7 bearings that are 8x22x7, and 3 of the 5/16 shafts at 5 inches each. We obtained our 5/16s by slicing up a 24-inch rod.
For this project, you'll need base panels 1 and 2, a thick and thin gear stick with spacers 3 and 2 respectively, a spool body with its connected gear and in the wheel for the other side, 2 base connectors, and several spacers. The remaining parts are pre-constructed to their respective mechanical parts at the start of the assembly. Don't forget to use this photo as a checklist.
During our printing, our filament pieces tend to gain some random quirks. For instance, sometimes our pieces can gain a little bit of lip due to some smushing of the printing process. Strands of extra filament often appear in our prints as well. We use a blade for tidying flat surfaces and a trimming tool for weeding our circular pieces.
Before our glue testing, we broke apart some leftover print and sanded it for the best glue grip. We tested a variety of glues, including wood glue, Elmer's, basic super glue, and Gorilla Glue. The final product came out with Gorilla Glue on top, though we ended up using a random primer and a regular super glue for our process. Alternatively, you can use a plastic bonder like this one, which we left untested.
It's hard to see in the photo, but our wheel has a super smooth side due to the glass base of our 3D printer. Our geared part also has an uneven surface, so it needs sanding on the wheel side. Here my teammate Jillian is sanding the uneven half until it's nice and smooth. Our wheel was sanded off camera, and we tried to show here how it wasn't as sleek anymore.
Since the primer required complete part coverage, our coach helped us prime both sides of the spool for gluing. Off camera, we used the super glue and left it to dry for over 24 hours. When the piece was dry and prepared for assembly, we were ready to start building the base for our spool.
The screws we've already inserted into the gear are M3x12 flatheads with M3 nuts screwed onto the other side. Make sure your gear is pushed all the way on or it won't lock with the others. Grab your base panel 2 with the gearbox hole. Collect 4 M3 washers for each of your M3x12 socket head screws. When your washer is on your screw, put it through the panel into the gearbox and loosely tighten it. The gearbox needs to stay loose since it disengages and re-engages with the gears constantly.
One of the base connectors has a couple grooves, meaning this is for the back end where the spool will rest. If you look carefully, you can also see one of the lips we mentioned earlier. Take your 10 to 32 shafts and slide them through both base connectors and base panels. Another pre-assembled part here involves the top base connectors and sticking them on each side of a bearing. A 10 to 32 shaft goes through these to connect them to the panels too. Finally, take several 10 to 32 nuts and tighten them on each extend end of the shaft. Your 10 to 32 shafts might go flat during cutting and not take the nuts, so it's okay to trim them further.
Time to get those gears in place. There is a definite difference in gear thickness and their rod length, so remember that the thin gear is gear 1 and the thick is gear 2. Our spacers are also labeled 1 through 3 from tallest to shortest. All of the spacers are on the gear end while still being within the panels. Put gear 2 in the middle with the number 2 spacer and slide a 5/16 shaft through. The thinner one goes in the front with the number 3 spacer and it takes another 5/16 shaft. We saw that one of the screws was in the way of the gear, so we had to place a shift between the gearbox and panel to give it some more spacing. Finally, the spool we assembled goes in the back with the number 1 spacer and our last 5/16 shaft. We had to tighten all of our 5/16 nylon nuts with a socket wrench.
Ta-da! And there you have it, our amazing gearbox. Don't forget to make sure everything is tight.
Thank you! Whether you contribute through money, views, likes, or subscriptions, we appreciate all of you. Thanks for sticking around!